Hello, radiant Leo soul, and welcome to Eternal Mindfulness. This is not just another horoscope. This is a moment. A turning point. A message that found you, not by chance, but because your soul was finally ready to hear it. Let me ask you something. Have you been feeling an invisible pull lately? A sudden stillness, a warmth on your shoulder, or a thought of someone you haven't seen in years? If so, you're not imagining things. Your grandmother, from the realm beyond the physical, is reaching out. Not through words, but through whispers of intuition, signs in nature, dreams you barely remember upon waking. And now, she's chosen this exact moment to speak louder. Through symbols, synchronicities, and yes, through this video. She's here not to warn you, but to free you. Leo, you've been carrying burdens that weren't yours to begin with. Emotional debts passed down through generations. Roles you never asked for. Silence that grew heavy in your chest. But your grandmother sees you. She sees the fire within you, and she knows it's time for you to stop carrying pain that doesn't belong to you. You are not just here to survive. You are here to break cycles. To be the one who says, "It ends with me." And this reading, this spiritual transmission, is your invitation to do just that. If you've been searching for a sign, this is it. And the reason it found you right now is because something deep inside you has already started to awaken. Here on Eternal Mindfulness, this space is sacred. It's where the cosmic and the personal meet. Where astrology, tarot, and spiritual insight align with your truth, not as a prediction, but as an activation. So let me take a moment to say something important. Thank you. Truly. For being here. For your presence. Every like, every comment, every subscription is more than support. It's a sign that you're listening to your soul's call. And your presence here fuels this channel to reach others like you, souls on the brink of breaking through. And Leo, you will want to stay with me through the very last minute of this reading. Because what the universe is revealing right now, it's not just guidance, it's a spiritual breakthrough. Something so deeply personal, it might bring tears. Something so cosmic, it might give you goosebumps. So tell me, what led you here today, dear Leo? What were you thinking, feeling, or asking when you clicked play? Drop the angel number you feel in your heart right now in the comments, whether it's 111, 26, 444, or something completely unique. That number is not random. It's your sign. It's your confirmation. It's your grandmother's soul whispering. I see you. I've always been here. The fire you carry, dear Leo, is not merely symbolic, it is a living current within you. It pulses through your breath, flickers in your courage, and steadies your stance each time you choose to rise, even when the world expects you to kneel. Leo energy is radiant, brave, and deeply loyal. But what's often forgotten is that your light, your boldness, your voice, your will to protect others, didn't appear out of thin air. It was sparked, long ago, by someone who saw it before you ever knew it existed. That someone, in this journey, is your grandmother. Not as a mystical presence or otherworldly spirit, but as a force of real, tangible love that shaped your foundation in ways so subtle, you may have overlooked them. Think of her as the quiet root system beneath a towering tree. You don't always see the roots, but without them, the tree could never stand. She is that root, soft and still, yet unshakable. When she passed the flame to you, it wasn't to burden you with duty. It wasn't to make you the next in line to carry weight for the family or suffer in silence. No, she gave you that flame so you could walk forward with clarity. So you could illuminate paths that were never safe for her to walk. The strength you possess is not simply yours, it's a continuation of hers. She walked so you could run. She whispered her hopes into the world so you could one day speak them out loud. And now, you do. That fire has been misunderstood by many. Some may have tried to dim it, afraid of how brightly it burns. Others may have tried to mold it to fit their comfort. But you were never meant to live small, Leo. Your fire is meant to light your own path, not set yourself ablaze for someone else's warmth. And the moment you stop asking for permission to be radiant is the moment you begin to live in alignment with who you truly are. There's a teaching in ancient philosophy that speaks of the invisible inheritance, those internal qualities passed down not through wealth or words, but through the way we breathe, the way we feel things deeply, the way we know when to stand our ground. Your grandmother's legacy isn't just stories or old photographs. It's alive in you when you protect someone who's vulnerable. It's in your voice when you finally say no to what dishonors your truth. It's in the stillness that arises when you stop chasing approval, and instead, listen to your own heartbeat. This inner flame, like all sacred fires, requires tending. Not with grand gestures or external validation, but with gentleness. With self-trust. With remembering. You don't have to perform strength anymore. The strength is already in you, quietly waiting for you to recognize it as your own. And perhaps, this is the exact moment when you do. So, take a breath. Feel into that heat behind your ribs. Is it anxiety? Or is it power waiting to be claimed? Place your hand there. Whisper silently, if only for yourself, the light within me is not random. It was chosen. It was given. And now I walk with it. If this message stirs something in you, trust that. It's not drama. It's not coincidence. It's a homecoming. A return to your original brilliance, not the one shaped by others, but the one your grandmother quietly saw from the start. And now, so do you. How many times have you told yourself, "I'm fine," when your heart was quietly breaking? How many moments have you smiled through the pain, not because you were at peace, but because you didn't want to be a burden? In the radiant fire of Leo energy, there's often an unspoken pressure to always be strong, to lead, to inspire others, even when you yourself feel depleted. But here's the truth, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers, "I've had enough." And your grandmother, the one whose wisdom flows through your very being, has seen enough of you carrying the weight that was never meant to be yours. There is a cycle that many are born into without question. A pattern of quiet sacrifice, generational silence, and inherited emotional labor. The eldest daughters become the caretakers. The sons learn to hide their vulnerability. And the sensitive children, the intuitive, emotionally wise ones like you, grow up believing they must be the glue that holds everyone else together. But in doing so, they forget how to hold themselves. Your grandmother doesn't want you to repeat this story. She may have lived it, and even accepted it as her role, but from where she stands now, her message is simple and powerful. You were not born to carry the pain of your ancestors. You were born to transform it. And not by suffering through it, but by choosing something different. Choosing to soften. Choosing to be real. Choosing to say no to the unspoken expectations that keep you trapped in a version of yourself that's not truly you. There's a quiet kind of courage in choosing authenticity over performance. In stepping out of the role of the responsible one, the strong one, the one who never falls apart. Sometimes, the most radical act of healing is letting yourself be soft. Vulnerable. Human. Not because you're broken, but because you're whole, and wholeness includes every part of you, not just the polished, powerful pieces. The ancient teachings speak of a middle path, not of indulgence or denial, but of alignment. A life where you do not swing between extremes of overgiving and resentment, but instead learn to honor your needs without apology. You begin to understand that saying no is not rejection, it's protection. That boundaries are not walls but invitations for respect. And that the child within you, the one who still aches to be loved without condition, deserves a place at the table too. To choose yourself is not selfish, it is sacred. And when you do, you're not just healing for yourself. You're breaking a silent agreement that has echoed through generations. You're rewriting the script. And in doing so, you become a mirror for others to do the same. You offer permission, without even saying a word, for someone else to put down what was never theirs to carry. This is not about blaming those who came before. Your grandmother doesn't ask you to resent the path she walked. She only asks that you walk yours with more gentleness, more truth, more self-respect. Because you are not here to fulfill someone else's unfinished story. You are here to live fully, honestly, and with a heart that is finally allowed to rest. If your chest feels lighter reading these words, if your shoulders drop just a little, that's the sign. That's your body remembering what it feels like to be safe in your own truth. So let this be your quiet rebellion, not against others, but for yourself. You can start now. You can start small. You can start by writing it below. I choose to live honestly. I'm done pretending to be okay. Because you are not here to prove yourself. You are here to be free. Sometimes, what hurts the most isn't what happened, it's the weight we carry when we can't explain it. The heaviness that settles in our chest without a name. The dreams that once lived vividly inside us, now fading like morning mist before we could make sense of them. But there's something deeply important to understand, Leo. Not all wounds are evidence of weakness. Some are sacred markings. Proof of your capacity to feel, to endure, and to grow. The experiences you've survived, even the ones you didn't choose, are not stains on your spirit. They are imprints. Traces of strength that developed beneath the surface, often unnoticed until the moment you need them most. And while they may come from pain, they are not defined by it. Like a tree that twists around a rock to keep growing, your soul has adapted, learned, and quietly persisted. Right now, the energy around you invites you to reflect on how you've been taught to treat your pain. Have you been told to hide it? To muscle through it? To turn it into perfectionism, caretaking, or silent endurance? The reversed Empress card appears today not to criticize your journey, but to reveal something vital, that your capacity to nurture others was never meant to come at the cost of your own nourishment. This is the turning point. A soft yet powerful reminder that healing is not indulgence. It is repair. And for Leo, a sign ruled by the heart and fueled by inner fire, the body often speaks where words fail. Tightness in the chest. Sleepless nights. Blood pressure rising when unspoken emotions become too loud to ignore. These are not random symptoms, they are messages. Clues that the soul is ready to be heard. Your grandmother once tended to others not only through action, but through presence. Her love may have been expressed in quiet routines, preparing a meal, folding a blanket just so, offering her lap when you felt small. But the true power of those gestures wasn't in what she did, it was in the space she created for you to just be. And now, the invitation is to offer that same space back to yourself. Take a breath. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8. As you do, imagine the breath reaching all the places you've ignored or abandoned in the name of being strong. Not to fix anything, but to acknowledge it. Because acknowledgement is the first real act of care. There's wisdom in the body. In the foods that support vitality and emotional clarity, like the root vegetables that nourish your blood and ground your energy. Beets, carrots, turmeric, red apples, simple gifts from the earth that remind your cells that you are safe now. You don't have to hold everything anymore. You can even write to her, the grandmother whose influence you still feel, even if faintly. Tell her what you wish she knew. What you couldn't say before. Then, with intention, release the letter. Burn it, bury it, or fold it into a prayer. Not to summon her, but to honor her. To tell her that the light she saw in you didn't fade, it lives, it breathes, and now, it leads. Living well is not about forgetting pain. It's about reclaiming your story from it. Not living as the wound, but as the one who carries wisdom because of it. When you choose to no longer bear pain as a badge of worthiness, but instead walk as someone already whole, you change everything. For yourself. For those before you. And for those who come after. So let this be your quiet vow, I do not live to carry pain, I live to liberate it. And in doing so, you allow your fire to become something far greater than endurance. You allow it to become light. When you begin to release the weight of expectations that were never truly yours, something profound starts to shift. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it feels like a sigh that reaches deeper than the lungs. A subtle but undeniable return to your own frequency. That's when alignment starts to take place, not just emotionally, but energetically. And from that place, the flow of your life begins to change. The truth is, the universe doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to resonance. And when you begin to live more honestly, more freely, more in tune with who you really are beneath the masks, life doesn't get easier, it gets clearer. There is a natural order to things that doesn't need to be forced. Like the moon doesn't beg the ocean to rise, you don't need to plead for the right opportunities, the right people, or the right timing. But you do need to be still enough to notice when they arrive. And that stillness begins when you stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. You've already done the heavy lifting, Leo. And now, that deep internal work is opening a portal to the very purpose you were born for. The messages embedded in this moment, the quiet realizations, the strange synchronicities, aren't here just to comfort you. They are activations. They are keys to a much larger doorway. Your grandmother may have passed on her quiet wisdom through the unseen gestures of love, but what she truly left you with was an inner compass. A reminder that you are here not to survive your circumstances, but to rise beyond them. And that begins by choosing to live from your core, not your conditioning. This moment brings with it significant numerological energies. The number 6 brings your attention to family, not in the external, obligatory sense, but to the inner landscape shaped by generational patterns. This is a time to soften the emotional armor inherited from the past, and let love come from authenticity, not obligation. 26 signals a release of roles that asked you to live for others at the cost of yourself. It invites you to step into your own story, your own rhythm, free from the loop of proving your worth. 36 reflects a soul-level expansion, a rising of your inner vibration that elevates not just your mindset, but your capacity to experience life with grace. And 99, it's the full circle. A number of deep forgiveness. Of releasing karmic residue, not because you forget, but because you finally choose peace over protection. In your career or finances, if you felt lost, misaligned, or underappreciated, this is not a sign of failure. It's a signal that you've outgrown environments that don't reflect your real value. When you live aligned with your truth, not chasing validation or hustling for your worth, resources begin to find you. Not instantly, but steadily. Because you're no longer blocking them with self-denial. In love, the message remains the same: choose connection, not codependence. Love that mirrors your growth, not your wounds. Let your relationships reflect your light, not dim it. To love well, you must first be willing to see yourself clearly and gently. And to believe that it is safe to be fully known. So pause, right now. Take a breath and imagine a future where you no longer shrink to fit. A life where you no longer perform worthiness, but embody it. Can you see it? A version of you that receives love not because you earned it, but because you allowed it. A life not driven by fear of being too much or not enough, but by the quiet power of being exactly who you are. You're closer to that life than you think. The invitation is here. The question now is, are you ready to say yes to it? Sometimes the most profound kind of love is the one that asks nothing of you, no performance, no proving, no conditions. Just presence. Just truth. That's the energy surrounding you now. After so much effort to carry what others needed, to shape yourself in ways that felt acceptable, digestible, likable, you're being called into something radically different, the quiet strength of simply being yourself. Not the polished version. Not the one edited for comfort. Just you. Fully. This is not about rebellion. It's not about rejecting others or seeking validation in reverse. It's about remembering a truth that was never supposed to be forgotten, that your existence, exactly as it is, holds inherent value. You weren't sent here to impress or to conform, you were sent to express something that only you can. And the more you try to mold that into someone else's definition of worthy, the more you cut off the very light you were meant to shine. You may have spent years trying to be understood. Years trying to fit into roles that weren't designed for your shape. But understanding is not the goal anymore, alignment is. Being understood by others may bring comfort, but being aligned with yourself brings peace. There's a subtle difference, and it matters. Your grandmother, in all the wisdom she carried, saw something in you that maybe you couldn't see in yourself yet. A spark. A quality that didn't need to be explained or justified. She didn't wait for you to earn your right to exist in fullness, she just believed in it. And while you might not have the chance to hear her say it out loud, that belief still lives in the space between your breaths, in the silence that holds you when the world feels too loud. Sometimes healing doesn't come from fixing what was broken. It comes from no longer questioning what was always whole. From no longer explaining your truth to people committed to misunderstanding it. From walking away from rooms where your spirit has to shrink just to keep the peace. There's a concept that speaks of right view, the idea that true clarity arises not when others agree with you, but when you see yourself without distortion. You don't need to be approved of to be whole. You don't need to be praised to be at peace. You only need to see clearly. And right now, the clarity that's arriving is this: you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply never meant to be anyone else. Even in the smallest moments, like sunlight falling across your skin, you can remember that. Let it be your reminder. When you feel lost or unseen, place your hand over your heart and whisper what she always believed: I am already enough. I don't have to become more. I just have to be more me. Let that become your practice. Not a ritual to earn something, but a return to what's already yours. Let the golden hues remind you of faith in yourself. Let soft pastel tones become the gentleness that wraps around the parts of you that were silenced for too long. This is what freedom looks like, not grand declarations or dramatic change, but small acts of self-honoring. Quiet permission. Radical softness. And the choice, over and over again, to stop contorting who you are for anyone else's comfort. Say it softly or boldly, but say it like you mean it. I don't need to be accepted, I just need to be me. And as you do, notice how the world doesn't collapse. It realigns. The universe, like your grandmother, doesn't need you to change who you are. It just wants you to return to who you've always been. If you're still here, then a part of you, perhaps the quietest, most tender part, has heard the call. Not from me, but from someone whose love runs deeper than time. She hasn't left you, not truly. She's been there all along, watching not with eyes, but with presence. And maybe today, in a brief moment, a sudden chill, a warmth in your chest, sunlight touching your hand, you felt it. A whisper from beyond habit and fear: you don't need to carry it anymore. You've done more than enough. You've tried. You've held silence when you needed to speak. You've made space for others while leaving none for yourself. You've carried burdens that never truly belonged to you. And still, you rose. But now, that era is closing. Not in resentment, but in release. The chains of inherited expectation have begun to dissolve, not because someone outside you gave permission, but because your soul no longer consents to wear what doesn't fit. You are not here to carry the pain of others. You are not here to fulfill stories written in fear or duty. You were born to break the loop. To become the first in your lineage who chooses to live from truth, not survival. And when you do that, when you speak gently to yourself, when you set down what's too heavy, when you love without needing to shrink, you're not just healing yourself. You're freeing those who came before you, including her. You may have longed for her arms, for her words, for that soft, "I'm proud of you," that never came in the way you needed. But perhaps, in this moment, it arrives differently. Through your choice to finally honor yourself. That's how the love comes full circle. That's how her legacy transforms, not in pain, but in your peace. So start small. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your breath, that quiet proof you're still here. Whisper something sacred, "I choose to live true. I do not carry what doesn't belong to me." And if that touched something deep in you, leave a comment below. Let the universe witness your commitment. Let your voice break the silence for someone else who needs to see it. Write, "Grandma, I choose to live the light you believed in." Or say what your heart needs to say. Even a single word can become a revolution. Thank you, truly, for staying with me until this very moment. Your time, your openness, your willingness to feel, they mean more than you know. Every like, every comment, every share helps this channel, Eternal Mindfulness, carry these messages further. But more than that, they help create a community where softness is strength, and truth is honored. And Leo, if you've ever needed a sign to begin again, not by becoming someone new, but by fully becoming yourself, this is it. The door is open. The path is lit. And she's smiling from that sacred place beyond the noise, because today, you listened. Stay with me on this journey. Subscribe if this spoke to your soul. Share this video with someone who carries too much. And remember, healing doesn't begin with fixing, it begins with choosing. So now I'll ask you gently, but clearly, what are you ready to set down? And who might you become if you finally stopped proving, and simply allowed yourself to be?